My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 68 years old, and the day my own son decided I was a burden was the day my life quietly split in two. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic confrontation like you see in movies, just a kitchen table, a mug of coffee growing cold, and two people sitting across from me, speaking in careful, rehearsed sentences as if they had practiced them in the car before coming inside. My son, Daniel, wouldn't meet my eyes. His wife Claire did all the talking. She always did. "Mom," she said, folding her hands like this was some kind of intervention, "we've been going over finances, and things are tight." I remember nodding slowly, not because I agreed, but because I was waiting for the real sentence, the one hiding behind the polite words. Daniel cleared his throat. "The pension," he said, "it's not enough anymore. And honestly, supporting you like this, it's becoming difficult." Supporting me. That word landed wrong, sharp, heavy. I had lived in that house for 34 years, paid every mortgage payment myself, raised my son alone after his father died, worked 2 jobs for a decade just to keep the lights on. But now, at 68, sitting at my own table, I was being told I was being supported. Claire leaned forward, voice soft but firm. "We're not saying this is your fault. It's just, you're retired now. You don't really contribute anymore." I looked at my hands. They were older now, thinner, veins more visible. These were the same hands that had balanced budgets at midnight, the same hands that had typed reports, signed contracts, written checks that kept our lives afloat. But all Claire saw were wrinkles. Daniel finally looked up. His eyes were tired, guilty, but determined. "We think it would be best if we stopped using your pension for household expenses," he said. "We need to focus on our future." "Stopped using my pension." I waited for him to finish the sentence, for the part where he said, "But of course you'll be okay. Of course we'll make sure you're taken care of." He didn't. Instead, Claire smiled. "You understand, right? You don't really have many expenses anymore." I thought of the electric bill, the groceries I still bought, the medications I quietly paid for myself. But I said nothing, because something inside me had gone very still. That was the moment I realized this conversation wasn't about money, it was about control. After that day, the house felt different, smaller, colder. My groceries began disappearing faster than usual. My favorite tea stopped being replaced. The internet in my room became unreliable. Claire would say things like, "We're trying to simplify," or "You don't really need that anymore, do you?" Always with a smile. Daniel avoided me, left early, came home late. When we passed in the hallway, he'd nod like I was a neighbor, not his mother. And I let it happen. That's the part people don't understand. They assume silence means weakness, that compliance means surrender. But sometimes silence is observation. You see, I didn't always live quietly. Before retirement, I spent 35 years working in corporate finance, risk analysis, asset management, the kind of work where 1 decimal point can cost millions. I had overseen budgets larger than my son's entire company, but Claire didn't know that. To her, I was just an old woman who didn't understand modern systems, someone who still paid bills manually and didn't talk about money. So she assumed I didn't have any. She assumed wrong. The thing about underestimating people is this: you stop hiding from them. Claire started taking my mail. Not openly, just casually picking it up first, sorting through it, handing me junk flyers while anything official disappeared upstairs into her office. At first, I wondered if I was imagining it. Then I noticed the bank envelopes, the investment summaries. Gone. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone, laughing. "Oh, don't worry, she doesn't even check that stuff anymore." She meant me. That night I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Not angry, not yet. Just disappointed. I had given my son everything, every opportunity, every advantage I never had. When his father died, Daniel was 9. I remember the look on his face at the funeral, confused, terrified, clinging to my hand like I was the only solid thing left in the world. I promised him then I would always protect him. And I did. I protected him when he failed classes, when he dropped out of his first program, when his startup collapsed and left him drowning in debt. I quietly paid it off. He never knew. I didn't want him to feel small. And now here he was, letting his wife make me feel exactly that. One evening, as I washed my own plate while they watched television, Claire said, without looking at me, "You know, we've been thinking about downsizing." My hands froze in the sink. "This house is just too much," she continued, "for 3 adults. 3 adults. Not family, not mother and son. Adults." Daniel didn't say a word. I dried my hands slowly and walked back to my room. I closed the door, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because the irony was unbearable. You see, they thought my pension was my lifeline. They believed cutting it off would force me to shrink, to ask, to beg. They had no idea my pension was just a formality. They had no idea I hadn't touched my real assets in over a decade. They had no idea that the company Daniel worked for, the one he bragged about at dinner parties, the one Claire loved to mention whenever she felt important, they had no idea I was the silent majority shareholder. My name wasn't on the website. I didn't attend meetings. I never interfered. Because I trusted my son, and because I believed family and business should never mix. But trust, once broken, changes everything. That night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents Claire had never found, accounts she didn't know existed, ownership papers signed long before Daniel ever met her. I ran my fingers over the pages, steady, certain. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was dependent. They thought I would quietly fade into the background. And for now, I would let them believe it. Because the most dangerous thing in the world is a woman everyone thinks is finished. After that night, the drawer stayed closed. Not because I was afraid to open it again, but because I understood something important. Power works best when it's quiet. The next morning I woke at 5:42 a.m. out of habit. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the house breathe, pipes shifting, floorboards settling, sounds I had known for decades. The same house, but no longer my home. When I went to the kitchen, Claire was already there. She stood at the counter, scrolling on her phone, coffee steaming beside her. She didn't look up when I entered. "Morning," I said. She hummed something that might have been a response. The fridge was nearly empty on my side again. My yogurt gone, my fruit missing. Only condiments and leftovers I never ate. I made toast, plain, no butter left. As I sat at the table, Claire finally glanced up. "You're up early," she said. "I always am." She smiled thinly. "Right, I forget." That word again. Forget. As if I were already halfway erased. Daniel rushed in a few minutes later, jacket in hand, tie crooked. He looked surprised to see me. "Hey, Mom," he said quickly, already reaching for the door. "Daniel, do you have a minute?" He froze, just for a second. Clara's eyes lifted from her phone. "I'm late," We'll talk later, okay? Later never came anymore. The door shut behind him. The house felt hollow again. I cleaned my plate, wiped the counter, moved slowly, not because I had to, but because moving carefully gives you time to notice things. And I was noticing everything now. Like how Claire had turned the spare bedroom into her office and installed a lock. Like how utility bills were suddenly addressed only to Daniel. Like how my name had quietly disappeared from shared accounts I had opened myself decades earlier. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just systematic. One afternoon, I overheard Claire on the phone in the living room. I was in the hallway, close enough to hear her voice clearly. "She doesn't need to know," she said. "She trusts us, and honestly, she wouldn't understand it anyway." She laughed. That laugh wasn't cruel. It was confident. The laugh of someone who believes the game is already won. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in bed remembering things I hadn't thought about in years, like the day Daniel first brought Claire home. She had been charming, polite, almost too careful with her words, complimented my cooking, asked about my work with interest that now felt rehearsed. I remembered how she asked detailed questions about my retirement, my investments, my plans. I had thought she was being thoughtful. I had been wrong. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since Daniel was a teenager. I followed him. Not in a dramatic way. I simply left the house after he did and drove behind him at a distance. He went to work, just as he always did. The company building stood tall downtown, glass, steel, confidence. The kind of place that made people feel important just walking into it. I sat in my car across the street for a long time. I remembered when that company was nothing more than an idea scribbled on napkins. Daniel had been so proud, so hopeful. I had believed in him enough to invest quietly, to protect him without overshadowing him. Now I wondered when that protection turned into permission. That afternoon when I returned home, Claire was waiting. "You were out," she said. "Yes." "Where?" I met her eyes. "Running errands." She studied my face like she was searching for cracks. "Next time just let me know," she said lightly. "We worry." We. The word felt rehearsed. That evening a letter arrived, a real one. It was sitting on the kitchen counter when I walked in. Already opened. I picked it up. Bank correspondence. My bank. "Did you open my mail?" I asked calmly. Claire didn't even flinch. It looked important. It was addressed to me. She shrugged. "Daniel and I handle finances now. It's easier this way." Easier for who? I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my pocket. That night, I went back to the drawer. This time, I took everything out. The documents were still there, untouched, unnoticed. Ownership records, trust agreements, share allocations, and a separate folder I hadn't opened in years. Inside were notes, old emails, legal summaries. I remembered now. I hadn't just invested in Daniel's company. I had done it through a trust, one designed to protect him and me. And Claire? Claire had never been added to anything. She had access, but no authority. That mattered. The next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own house. Meals eaten separately, conversations avoided, decisions made without me. Claire spoke freely now. She doesn't need that. She won't notice. She won't do anything. Daniel looked worse every day. Tired, thinner, hollow. One night, I found him alone in the kitchen staring at nothing. "Daniel," I said softly. He jumped. "Mom, you're not okay." He exhaled slowly, then shook his head. "I can't talk about it." I wanted to reach for him, to comfort him, but something stopped me, because I realized something important. Whatever was happening, he had chosen silence, and choices have consequences. The final straw came on a Friday. I came home from a walk to find my bedroom door open, drawers pulled out, closet disturbed. Claire stood there holding one of my old folders. "What are you looking for?" I asked. She turned, startled, but recovered quickly. "Just organizing," she said. "You have so much paperwork, it's a fire hazard." I stepped closer. "Don't put that down." Her eyes hardened. "You don't need all this anymore. We're trying to simplify your life." My life. I took the folder from her hands. "Don't go through my things again." She laughed softly. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being clear." She stared at me, surprised. For the first time, she looked uncertain. That night, Daniel didn't come home, and for the first time since this began, I stopped waiting for permission. I made 3 calls. The first to a lawyer I trusted, the second to the trustee, the third to the company's internal audit department. I said very little. I didn't accuse. I didn't. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday. Daniel stood in the kitchen staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. His coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam rising, forgotten. "Did you get paid?" Claire asked, not looking up from her laptop. Daniel swallowed. "No." She laughed once. "Very funny." "I'm serious." That got her attention. She snapped the laptop shut. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, nothing came in. No deposit, no notification, nothing." Clara's smile tightened. "Did you check again?" "I checked 3 times." I stayed quiet, sitting at the table, folding a napkin slowly in my hands. Claire glanced at me, just a flicker of irritation, like a mosquito buzzing nearby. "This is probably payroll messing up," she said. "It happens." Daniel didn't look convinced. Neither did I. By Thursday, things were unraveling. Credit card payments bounced. A subscription Claire insisted they couldn't live without was suddenly declined. The grocery store card didn't work. Claire paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp. "I don't care if it's a temporary hold," she snapped. "You need to fix it." She hung up and turned to Daniel. "Your company is screwing us." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "It's not just the company. The bank flagged something." She froze. "Flagged what?" "They wouldn't say." That night Bay argued behind closed doors. Not shouting. Worse. Low, clipped voices, the sound of a marriage cracking under pressure. I lay in bed listening. Not eavesdropping, just existing in a house with thin walls. Claire was scared. Daniel was confused. Neither of them suspected me, and that was the most dangerous part. The audit moved quietly. That was intentional. No announcements, no meetings, just emails, reviews, requests for clarification. Expenses Daniel had never questioned were suddenly being questioned. Vendor contracts Claire had handled were suddenly under scrutiny. The trust hadn't intervened yet, not officially. This was just gravity doing its work. One evening, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, alone, the house unusually quiet. "I don't understand what's happening," he said, rubbing his temples. "It's like everything just stopped." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't a bad man, just a weak one. When things stop working, it's usually because they were never built properly. He nodded, though I wasn't sure he understood. Claire came in halfway through our conversation. She stopped short when she saw us together. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. "Work," Daniel said quickly. She smiled at him, then looked at me. "Well, we should probably be careful. Stress isn't good for some people." "Some people." I smiled back. "Neither is greed." Her expression flickered, just for a second. That weekend, Claire started digging. I could tell. Drawers reopened, old files resurfaced, her office door stayed locked longer than usual. She asked Daniel questions he couldn't answer. Who owns what? Who signed off on this? Why does your name not appear here? He snapped back for the first time in years. Because you said you handled it. That silence afterward was loud. By Monday, Claire was no longer subtle. She cornered me in the hallway. You wouldn't know anything about what's going on, would you? I met her eyes, calm, neutral. No. She studied my face like she was trying to crack a safe. You've been different lately. Have I? Yes, she said sharply. Quieter. I smiled. I've always been quiet. That night, Daniel knocked on my door. He looked like a child again, lost, tired. Did you ever invest in my company? The moment hung between us. I believed in you, I said carefully. He nodded slowly. Claire appeared behind him, eyes wide. You never said anything, she snapped. I didn't think I needed to. She stared at Daniel. Did you know this? No, he whispered. Something shifted then. Not completely, but enough. Over the next few days, things accelerated. The company requested documentation Claire couldn't produce. The bank scheduled a meeting. The trust, my trust, formally stepped in. Claire's authority evaporated overnight. Her confidence cracked. She stopped smiling, stopped pretending. One evening, she exploded. This is your fault, she screamed at Daniel. You let her play stupid while she pulled the strings. I stood in the doorway. You underestimated me, I said quietly. She turned, furious. You planned this. No, I replied. I prepared for it. Daniel looked between us, realization dawning too late. You didn't protect me, she hissed at him. You protected her. He said nothing, because for the first time, he couldn't deny it. By the end of the week, Claire packed a bag, not to leave, but to threaten. I need space, she said coldly. Figure out where your loyalty lies. Daniel didn't stop her. The house was silent after the door closed. I sat down at the table. Daniel sat across from me. I didn't know how to fix it, he said. I know, I replied. That was the truth. But knowing doesn't erase consequences. And the final reckoning, that was still coming, because the numbers weren't done speaking yet. And numbers never lie. Claire didn't come home that night. Daniel sat at the kitchen table until after midnight, his phone face down, untouched. He didn't ask where she was. He didn't call. He just sat there, elbows on the table, staring at the same spot in the wood grain like it might offer answers. I went to bed around 1 in the morning, not because I was tired, but because I had learned something important about waiting. Waiting lets people reveal themselves. The next morning, Daniel looked 10 years older. His shoulders slumped. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. She says she needs time. I poured my tea slowly. Time doesn't fix broken structures, I said. It just shows where the cracks are. He nodded faintly. The house felt strange without Claire's presence. Not peaceful, just exposed, like the walls had been stripped down to studs. That afternoon, the formal notices arrived. Not by email, by certified mail. I knew before I opened them what they were. Audit conclusions, compliance failures, frozen disbursements. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel, just facts. Daniel sat across from me as I read. She handled all of this, he said quietly. I didn't even know where half the money went. I know, I replied. He looked up sharply. You do? Yes. He swallowed. Then why didn't you stop it? I folded the letter carefully. Because I needed you to see it. He flinched. That hurt, but it was necessary. Later that evening, Claire called. Daniel put the phone on speaker. I spoke to a liar, she said, without reading. This is getting out of hand. I leaned back in my chair. Daniel said nothing. They're accusing me of mismanagement, she continued. They're threatening litigation. Because you mismanaged, I said calmly. There was a pause. Then anger, sharp and uncontrolled. You planned this, she snapped. You sat there pretending to be harmless while you destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything. I stopped pretending. She laughed bitterly. You ruined my marriage. No, I replied. You built it on control. Daniel closed his eyes. Claire's voice softened. Dangerous now. Calculated. Daniel, you know I did everything for us. For you, I corrected. Silence. Then, the call ended. The next few days were relentless. Meetings, documents, interviews. Daniel learned things he had never questioned before. Side accounts, unauthorized transfers, consulting fees paid to shell companies. Claire had been careful, but not careful enough, because she believed no one was watching. She believed I was finished. One evening, Daniel found me in the living room holding an old photo album. I don't recognize my life, he said quietly. You do, you just ignored the parts that were inconvenient. He sat down heavily. I let her speak for me, he admitted. I let her make decisions because it was easier than arguing. And when it stopped being easy, I asked. He didn't answer. The legal process moved faster than Claire expected, not because of me, because of paper trails, because numbers remember everything. By the end of the week, she was formally removed from any financial authority. Her accounts were frozen, her leverage gone. She showed up at the house 2 days later, unannounced. No makeup, no confidence, just fury. She stormed into the living room. You think you've won? She hissed. I stood slowly. I think the truth finally arrived. She turned to Daniel. You're just going to let her do this? Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't defend her. That silence told her everything. You chose her, she spat. No, he said finally. I chose reality. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. You'll regret this, she said, grabbing her bag. Both of you. She slammed the door. And just like that, the house exhaled. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. No shouting matches, no public scenes, just paperwork, consequences, separation. Daniel moved into the guest room. Claire moved into a friend's apartment. The company stabilized, quietly, responsibly. I thought it was over. I was wrong. That came the night he found the old trust documents. He came into my room holding the folder with shaking hands. You never needed me, he said. I looked at him. That's not true. You could have stopped everything the moment she crossed a line. Yes? Then why didn't you? I met his eyes. Because I needed to know who you were without her voice in your ear. Tears filled his eyes. You failed me. No, I said softly. You failed yourself. That truth broke him. And sometimes things have to break before they can be rebuilt. By the end of that month, divorce papers were filed. Claire contested everything, lost most of it. Not because I pushed, because she had nothing left to stand on. Daniel resigned from his position, voluntarily. He needed distance, from the company, from the marriage, from the man he had become. The night before he moved out, he stood in the doorway of my room. I don't know who I am without her, he said. You will, but it won't be comfortable. He nodded. And for the first time in years, he hugged me. Not out of obligation, out of understanding. There was one thing Daniel still didn't know, one final truth, and it wasn't about money. The house was empty the morning Daniel moved out. Not abandoned, just quiet in a way that felt earned. No slammed doors, no last arguments, just the sound of a suitcase rolling down the hallway and the soft click of the front door closing behind him. I stood at the kitchen window and watched him load the car. He paused before getting in, staring at the house like he was trying to memorize it. He didn't wave. Neither did I. Some goodbyes don't need gestures. When the car disappeared down the street, I sat at the table alone and let the silence settle. It didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. For the first time in years, no one was managing me. No one was monitoring my movements, my money, my presence. I made tea the way I liked it, strong, no sugar. And I waited, because there was one thing left to do. 2 days later, Daniel called. His voice was quieter than I remembered, not defeated, just stripped of performance. "I found something," he said. "I know," I replied. Silence stretched between us. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Yes." He came that evening, no suitcase, no agenda, just him. We sat in the living room where he'd learned to read, where he'd once built towers out of blocks and cried when they fell. He held a manila folder in his lap. "I didn't know," he said, "about the trust, about the conditions. I didn't hide them," I replied gently. "You just never asked." He swallowed. "It says control was never supposed to pass to me if I couldn't maintain independence." "Yes. And that the shares were never meant to be inherited automatically." "That's right." His hands shook slightly. "So even if Claire hadn't done what she did, she still wouldn't have had access," I finished. "And neither would you, unless you met the conditions." He looked up. "You didn't trust me." I considered my words carefully. "I trusted your heart, not your boundaries." That landed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "She knew," he whispered. "Not everything, but enough. She knew there was more. She pushed me to push you." "I know." "How?" "Because people who crave control always reveal themselves eventually." He nodded slowly. "I let her," he said. "I let her talk for me. I let her make me feel like choosing peace meant choosing her." I didn't interrupt. "And when she turned on you," his voice broke, "I told myself I was stuck, that I couldn't change anything." "You could," I said quietly. "You just didn't want to lose what you thought you had." He closed his eyes. "I lost you instead." "No," I replied. "You almost did." He looked up sharply. "Almost." We sat with that. After a moment, he opened the folder and slid a single page toward me. "He didn't know about this," he said. It was handwritten. Not recent. Old. My handwriting. The letter I'd written years ago, after his father died. I had forgotten about it. He read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I trusted you enough to let go. But trust isn't obedience, and love isn't silence. If you ever choose comfort over integrity, you will lose them both." He stopped. "I thought you were controlling," he admitted. "I thought you didn't let go because you didn't believe in me." "I didn't let go." "You live differently." He nodded. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Not the company, not the house, not forgiveness on demand." "That's good," I replied, "because none of those are bargaining chips." He exhaled shakily. "I just want to know if there's a way forward." "There is, but it won't look like before." He accepted that. And that told me everything. Claire tried once more. A letter from her lawyer arrived a week later. Threats, accusations, demands. I didn't respond. Neither did Daniel. Because power loses its voice when no one is listening. The divorce finalized quietly. The company stabilized fully. Daniel found a smaller job, one where his name didn't open doors. He didn't complain. As for me, I stayed in the house a little longer. Long enough to repaint the walls, to clear rooms that held old versions of myself, to let go without resentment. Then I sold it. Not out of loss, out of completion. I moved somewhere quieter, smaller, by choice. People assume that endings like this are about revenge. They're not. They're about alignment. I didn't win because I took anything away. I won because I stopped pretending. And here's the truth no one talks about. The money was never the point. The company was never the point. Even the betrayal wasn't the point. The point was this: you don't protect people by shielding them from consequences. You teach them how to stand. Daniel is learning. So am I. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this: being underestimated is not an insult. It's an advantage. Because when people believe you're finished, they stop watching. And that's when you decide who you really are.